Good morning. We are live from Hamburg. This is AWS Security Live. My name's Rob Hale. I'm the security leader for EMEA, helping to glue together all different parts of our partner security with AWS native controls for better security outcomes for customers. I am joined by my amazing co-host, Gilson.
Hey everybody, my name is Gilson Wilson and I am the global leader for our security competency at AWS across all of our GSI and ISV partners. Happy to be here talking about all things security. And if you're just joining us, Security Live is a program that discusses the latest and greatest in security, talking about some of the basics of security. We try to keep it simple and easily understandable for all our audience, just given the wide variety of personas that we have. And of course, we are going to be talking to some incredible partners like Claranet. Welcome, Fabian.
Hey,
Thanks for having me. My name is Fabian. I'm with Claranet for already 14 years, actually.
Wow.
So I'm a cloud service director here in Claranet Germany. So we are covering the core business, which is migration, modernization business. But we are essentially managed service provider covering our customers when it comes to cloud in general, when it comes to SAP, security, or even workplace. So that's basically what we're at.
And welcome. It's great to have such amazing partners. And Claranet are a long-term security competency partner as well with AWS. So you have the security experience, certifications, and capabilities to make sure that customers are architecting and keeping themselves secure. So tell us a little bit about the kind of customer journey that you have, Fabian, with your customers. So when do your customers start talking to you? How do you help them to migrate to the cloud and stay secure?
So one of the motives which pretty much reflects what we have seen on the keynote of Partner Summit today is basically increasing concerns from customers how to deal with regulations and this more rising pressure due to new upcoming regulations. And it was a basic theme by the keynote today. So there were basically, in my takeaways were twofold. One was more like increasing acceleration in all organizations out there in the market, applying more pressure to organizations to think about how am I able to cope with this? How am I able to adopt like AI? And in the meantime, especially for European companies and for German companies in particular, how am I able to deal with this regulational burden, let's put it. And especially in the last few months, I would say there were even customers approaching us with questioning their cloud journey at all. And for us, it is one of our, let's say, mission is to educate and shed some light on the power of the cloud, the power of AWS, not only as a runtime for your workload, more like an ecosystem for your IT. So there are answers, and I would be happy to share clarity and shed some light today on the potential answers addressing certain regulatory requirements. And AWS always pushed those forward and was quite candid and frank about those. There are regulations, they are there, we need to deal with them. And we give you the tools. We give you the means, the measures to be effective in those endeavors.
Okay, cool. So you're here in Germany. Where else are Claranet? How many offices do you have, or where do your customers operate? Where are you helping them?
We are actually a global company with a European footprint, so founded in the UK in London. And so basically footprint is Europe, so we are big in the big markets like UK, Germany, and France, but we also have branch offices in Brazil, in India, and of course in the USA. And here in Frankfurt, due to acquisitions in the recent history, we have offices in Cologne, in Stuttgart, in Waldorf, close to SAP, because we have a SAP competency. But headquartered are we in Frankfurt.
Wow, that's awesome. So proper, pan-European coverage, but also into international as well, into Americas. So that's really cool. So let's talk about. You mentioned a lot about compliance.
Yeah.
So what are your customers talking to you about? What are they mainly concerned about with compliance? Are we, is it GDPR? Is it NIS2? I hate to say the word DORA as well because it's on anybody in financial services lips at the moment. But give us an insight to what your customers are talking to you about.
Do I get to call you out on the acronyms?
Oh my God! I just
that was like
the biggest faux pas ever. The first, and I've got to spell those out as well.
That's right. You might as well just put stuff in the swear jar.
Yeah, I'll just
What was the trigger word? What was the trigger word?
Any acronym. So
any acronym. Okay.
We should have introduced swear jar. So
right. Go ahead. You can.
Is GDPR or what?
So let me reintroduce the swear jar. So when we talk about an acronym and we haven't explained it first, then we will take this quality piece of 24-karat plastic and we'll put it in a swear jar. And we're going to be keeping tabs. And I've set the bar fairly low. So
I bet on at the end of the day this box will be totally filled up. We're talking with computer scientists. You're talking to computer scientists. With a technical background, acronyms is more or less
it's all language,
like air to breathe. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. And
the main thing is, of course, just given a wide range of people that are in our audience listening to us as we stream live. It's nice to kind of sometimes go back to the basics, kind of walk them through the context of what we're talking about. But actually, we should probably give a pass on the compliance standards and mandates because they're all like government.
But I think for a moment it makes sense. If you on the one hand, sorry for jumping in front of you. If you on the one hand, has like an armory of tools and services to deal with, I think it makes sense to be at least for a moment aware of what awaits you on this side. So where are those concerns coming from? Where are these burdens coming from? And from a regulatory point of view, I think you could structure it that way. It is, regulation from you, more like steering towards competition, to regulate competition, which is not so much what we could answer technically. But when it comes to data, which is, of course, GDPR, General Data Processing Regulation, so just to explain it.
Well done.
And of course, thirdly, like security, which is mandating from an European point of view, which makes totally sense to mandate any organization in the EU to be more resilient and take investments to be more resilient. And in this kind of category, I think DORA, NIS2, and CRITIS in Germany falls into. So, and the answer for these challenges are different. So that's why I think it makes sense in the beginning to structure, what is actually, how to structure this regulation in Arab, because otherwise it's just a blob. Okay, there are regulatories we need to deal with, but what is it exactly?
Yeah, and this is a key question I find that customers ask as well. Whether you're in a business persona or a technical role, is a lot of the time compliance and regulation, it's an acronym, and you don't really understand what that means. The classic question that we see asked a lot is, what tools do I need to buy? What do I need to buy to make myself GDPR compliant? And that's just not a realistic prospect because, with anything to do with security or compliance, it's people, it's process, and then there are some tools that can help you to enforce that.
Yeah.
So, how would you, what would be your advice for customers who are looking to start a cloud journey? Maybe they're looking to build an application or actually migrate to the cloud. How can they start best to make sure that they are in a good place to be compliant, when that time comes?
Yeah. So it's always a good start if you start really from the green field, because then it's easy to find solutions, right? I think for let's say the gravitational center on regulations is GDPR in Europe. So this is something you need to be aware of, and you need to be aware of what are the principles the regulators mandate. And those principles are in a certain tension to the US Cloud Act. So organizations need to be aware of this risk and then ask the question, okay, what could I, like you said, people, tools, and processes, what are my answers to this? For GDPR, the answers AWS puts forward is basically first, you could choose your data residency, and not only once, which makes it easy in the beginning. If you start, okay, I choose a region, I would really have my PII personally identifiable information only reside in a certain zone or a certain location, but you could also observe and monitor this. So AWS is providing us as a partner for implementing those solutions for our customers with tools like the control tower, which is AWS control tower, which is very helpful in building up like AWS structures in organization, multiple accounts, caring for IAM. I don't know. Is it also an acronym? Which
it is an acronym, but Identity Access Management.
But you know the interesting thing, Fabian, is if you explain it, you don't have to put a coin.
Okay, good. All right. I'm putting on and then explaining it.
It is going to be very hard to...
Is there any end some lottery? Who is winning this? What did you do? How many current plastic?
Fabian's just defending my my score by making sure it's a little bit more even. So I applaud you. Thank you.
We might convert all of it to like what 0.00001 Bitcoin. I don't know what it's going to be, but
that might be a bit with the current market. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I know. There could be a few more zeros in there. I don't know. We'll see.
So coming back to the topic, I know, coming from a technological background, compliance tends to be boring. But it isn't, because in the end, in technological challenges, you strive for clarity in complex environments, which is exactly applies to compliance as well. So talking about AWS Control Tower, it helps you building up those infrastructures in AWS, but also helps in preserving those policies, like ensuring policies are obeyed, violations are being marked, and AWS Control Tower is, let's say, a service front end, which utilizes different services from the AWS ecosystem. You could bake into CloudTrail as an audit logging for being aware of what kind of changes has been made in order to detect drift. So you have a well-known GDPR compliant state of your AWS infrastructure, but you would like to detect wanted and unwanted change, because on an annual basis, on a regular basis, auditors coming into your office and want to see, okay, what happened, where are the evidences for this and that, and having an audit log is one of the key answers for this, and especially addressing the concerns or companies questioning their cloud journey they are already in or they want to start. We need to explain them then the value, as I said earlier, of AWS is not only having a single piece of technology or being fast. It's really this kind of integrated, comprehensive approach about all your actually IT infrastructure up to workload and application. And this applies to CloudTrail, for example. You have CloudTrail for any service. So, and you could fine-grain the level of detail you want to be aware of. AWS Config, as let's say a partner in crime for CloudTrail and Control Center, is the state as it is of any kind of object you provision and configure in the AWS cloud, which is a different mean you could leverage for, again, checking on are you still on track with your GDPR compliance measures.
So this is like, if we boil this down and kind of summarize it, we're really saying is, look, the best way to be compliant and be secure as well, because security or compliance doesn't always equal security, but is to have a repeatable architecture and policy that has all your policies and your tools built in that you can replicate so your developers can move fast. And we have a saying, move fast but stay secure, and it's what our customers really, really want to do and aim for. But if you have that immutable architecture that you can build quickly that's compliant, you're then really monitoring for exceptions, rather than having to go through the whole process and say, well, look, is every single workload that we're running, is it compliant, is it secure? And that's, I think, the beauty of the AWS cloud is that customers tell us that they can, they're much further on their journey to continuous compliance and compliance monitoring, and they can see when they're likely to have to intervene or have an exception versus scanning the entire infrastructure all the time to work out actually where are we from a compliance perspective, once a year, which that never works from a security or a compliance perspective.
Yeah, definitely. So, it is a wide spectrum. I call it armory because in my point of view, even blending this with security, it is an armory to defend ourselves. So we were talking about like data residency to be in a deliberate way decide where should my data be stored on AWS global infrastructure. We were talking about like creating consistent infrastructures and structures on AWS, how to monitor it, to deal with like policies in order to really enforce your compliance. But there are more to it. There's more to it. So an essential part of it is encryption. So, a variety of AWS service is equipped with like encryption functionality. You need to be aware of that it's the case. You need to be able to use it. You need to be draw the implications towards key management systems. This applies to data at rest, of course, data at transit, which I think is well known, is best practice in reality in the pace of those projects. It's something where you need go the extra mile. Let's put it that way, because encryption always is a chain of trust. You need to be aware of, okay, where is the source, who is the trustee, and so on. So you could even, AWS even supports like using key management system outside AWS. So like coming back to the concerns of organizations out there, it's about trust, right? Yep. It's about having trust in front of your customers who give you their data. It's about trust in terms of regulatory institutions. But it's also trust between AWS as a hyperscaler and the partners choosing AWS. And, there could be no more trust than, you could encrypt your data and you have the key. So we, in terms of from an AWS perspective, we simply do not have access to this data. So one additional answer to this is definitely encryption. And there is like all of those topics way more to it, because you could even raise the question for like, okay, what about data in use?
Yeah.
So is this something which is a eligible strategy for you? Because it also draws a few implications. So talking about confidential computing, trusted computing environments, which AWS and especially Graviton supports, which needs, I think, a few extra considerations architectural-wise. Think about, like communication. It's an isolated environment. How am I able to talk to it? But again, coming to trust, so you have all those three area life cycles: data in rest, data in transit, and data in use being covered. And the thing you need to answer yourself is, how do I, leverage this armory?
Yeah, I think that's really important. You mentioned a few things there, but trust but verify is a really key point here. So customers are using the infrastructure on AWS to make sure they're encrypting everywhere. That's super important, and also control where their data is. You need to know where your data is, where it's processed, where it's stored, and you have the appropriate controls around it. And you can use AWS tools and third-party tools as well to discover what that data is. We mentioned PII earlier, so personally identifiable information. You might also have credit card information, etc. there. Yep. So knowing what that data is, where it is, what the security policy is around it is key. But you can also, as a customer, if your security policy, and this comes back to the policy elements of security, you can keep control of your keys. You could actually keep them off-site in an HSM, for example, if that's your security policy. And that could, if you're, national security or you're heavily regulated, you might need to keep those keys as encryption wrapping keys as an HSM in a particular location. And we have customers who do that. Yep. I think the key thing is that we allow you to encrypt as default.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point, Rob, because I think a lot of people miss out the fact that as we're moving into a cloud environment, you tend to forget the offsite, offline side of everything from backups to managing keys offline to managing certain processes. So it's the entire architecture that's actually built in from the cloud side all the way through to offline is actually going to be part of your solution. And I think it's great that you brought that up. Yeah. One thing, Fabian, I wanted to pull on was, I think earlier you had mentioned it is, customers are a little, thoughtful in terms of whether they want to move workloads to the cloud. And I think one of the things that we have consistently seen in the last couple of years is that security is actually the #1 deterrent for customers to move their workloads into the cloud. And even though the cloud in time proves that it's actually more secure, and are you seeing more of this now or less of this? Do you see a trend?
Yes, of course. So, it is definitely increasing trends. We've heard from the keynote, the market in terms of growth rates are significant and are, some kind of evidence for this observation. And it's security, it's trust. Security helps building trusting platforms, trusting stacks and environments. But, I would like to follow up on the topic earlier, because you mentioned offsite locations, and I imagine envision this for myself, like AWS is providing you a slider, you know what I mean, this kind of UI element where you really could choose your degree of like isolation, localization, and AWS is providing you with, on each of those stage, let's say positions of those slider, an answer. And one is of course like really having your on-premise solution with AWS Outposts. Another one is, which has been a prominent topic in the keynote as well, is the European sovereign cloud, I think it will be available end of 2025, which is being built in Brandenburg here in Germany. So where is quite a demand, to be honest. Because again, we could talk about technical things, compliance things, but in the end, it's about the customer and what is really the concern.
That's right.
And, like coming back to our initial, to the start of our conversation, customers really having this kind of concern, and the sovereign cloud is one definite answer to this. And definite answer, particular because it is an let's say, isolated legal entity. It's a different company. It's a different team. It's even a different SOC, Security Operations Center. It is not connected to the central control plane of AWS. So you could be sure that your metadata in terms of like what kind of objects, what kind of services, how do I configure those from a user perspective of AWS, is being stored and being kept in this data center, which is very important for highly regulated industries, but as well for like governmental sector, like public sector. Yeah. So this is, I think, for German market, a real game changer, I guess. Since I'm working for a European company, my colleagues from France and the UK, they're always making fun of us, and they ask questions like, regulatory questions to these German guys, and they always say, okay, if the Germans are happy with it, then we are also happy with it.
So that's fantastic.
So it's no coincidence that this sovereign cloud is being built in Brandenburg, and I guess this will be really a huge winner, especially for this kind of conversations we have with our customer. And there is, like, let's say, if I may add, really from a high-level perspective, if there still are concerns for like operational sovereignty, just this concern of companies, do I fall into a trap of a vendor lock-in? Is this your concern? Then even for this concern, there are answers at hand, which is called Kubernetes. So if this is the point, you could try to leverage portability. You could try to leverage Kubernetes as your, not only, again, orchestration layer, more like your runtime environment. EKS is a superior product you could use. And you could even blend this with the native services you have at hand, with the extensibility of Kubernetes, building your own ecosystem within Kubernetes. But of course, this comes for a price. So if you're building up your own AWS cloud within Kubernetes, then it's something where you need to invest in advance. But you could even think about it as one, let's say, building block for your individual solution.
That's interesting that you mentioned vendor lock-in, which is a genuine concern sometimes for our customers. But I think at AWS, a lot of the work that we do is building with open standards. So, for example, Security Lake as well is built with OCSF, which is the Open Cybersecurity Schema Framework. And there's various examples like that, because we work from the customer and we work backwards. We want to make sure that they have all the right tools but they're also solving the security challenges without thinking too much about, is this going to lock me into a specific technology, etc. So that's a very, very good point, Fabian.
And we see that with, we've all run, those siloed, monolithic databases on-prem that you have to keep up with. They're a compliance nightmare. And actually, one of the things that our customers are asking us to do is, look, how can we move from this siloed infrastructure to an open source database that we can start to use, for tools that are maybe AI related. So one of the things you don't want to do is try and run AI models against old on-prem databases. You really want to have modern databases that are open source. You can shift them to the right database for your task. But you need to make sure they're secure and they're compliant as well. And so that's one of the key tenets for AWS is we don't want to compromise on security for functionality. So we try and offer all of the services, and this is the basis of the sovereign cloud as well, is that we want our customers to have access to all of the services, but from a digitally and operationally sovereign perspective. I think that's super important.
I do like the slider analogy that you use, because I do know a lot of risk officers and information security officers that constantly play with that, because that's essentially the risk tolerance specific to your organization.
You need to know that.
Yeah, exactly. And it's never going to be one size fits all, right?
Definitely.
Every organization, depending on which industry you're in, you have these compliance mandates, you have regulations, of course, and a lot of these regulations sometimes overlap in the controls that they set for different customers based on the industry they're in. So it's actually pretty good to move that needle based on the journey of the customer as they go into a certain level of security maturity as well.
And this is what we're seeing in real-world projects. So it's not like having a blueprint which you roll out and replicate all over again. It's definitely not the case. So it's more like individual solution finding where the value of your partner ecosystem comes into play, where companies like Claranet come into play. So, but all this, there are fundamental requirements for this, and I would call it like this migration modernization journey. You could only leverage those, let's say, call it armory again, this kind of potential for being able to slide really fine-grained back and forth. If you modernized your stack, if you, like you said, this kind of monolithic silo databases, which we all know, which is quite a tedious task to, let's say, migrate to Aurora or to RDS, to Postgres, like Postgres, like you said, an open standard and open source software, which is which seems tedious and it also requires investments to do so, but then you're more open for your prospect, your future decisions, be it like compliance security or be it modern technologies like AI. You need to pull out those data and actually stacks at a whole in a more like we call it agile. Agile, somehow became a buzzword with an empty meaning, but it isn't. It's flexibility, being open to your future decisions. And perhaps one thing I take away from mine of the keynote was like these regulatory constraints, or let's say this legislation, they tend to be more longer lived than technology cycles. So
that's a great point.
That's a great point. So you need to be able to first, adapt to the market and to the movement, and you need to cope with current reality of regulations. And again, just to sum it up, being on the AWS cloud, being on a modern and agile stack is, in my point of view, the prerequisite for this.
That's really interesting. It shows the value that partners like Claranet have, because you've done this with so many customers. So, if you're a customer and you're wondering, look, I've gone under pressure from application owners to modernize, to reduce costs, to be faster and more agile, but obviously maintain security. And Claranet have done this with numerous other customers who are just like, perhaps just like your organization. So, and from a whether it's an architecture perspective or a consultancy perspective, or even an operation perspective, you have the experience and you can help them to make those decisions. So, Fabian, it's been absolutely awesome to have you as a guest on Security Live. If you are interested in Claranet services, and there's a QR code on the screen, please do check them out. We're going to be back in just a short while with CyberArk, and we're going to be talking about identity in the cloud. So thank you very much, and see you soon.
Thank you.